Imagine being called Happy Prince, but you've actually never been said it in your life. Hi everyone, today me and my friends are going to analyzing Oscar Wilde's short story, The Happy Prince. A story that looks very sweet on the outside, but hits very hard emotionally. Written in 1888 during the Victorian era, this story reflects a society where wealth and poverty existed side by side, but only one was truly seen. Oscar Wilde uses a statue and a small bird to question what happiness really means. Is it gold, statues, beauty, or is it sacrifice? Throughout this video, we will break down the plot, characters, conflicts, themes, and literary devices while keeping it interesting, of course. Let's begin with how the story actually unfolds.
And now I'm going to tell you the story.
The story begins with a magnificent statue standing above a city.
On a tall column stood the statue of the Happy Prince. For eyes, he had two bright sapphires, and a large red ruby glowed in his sword hilt.
Everyone calls him the Happy Prince, but from up there, he sees something no one else wants to notice: suffering. One night, a swallow lands at the statue. Planning to rest briefly before flying to Egypt. Instead, he meets a prince who asks for help.
Little swallow, will you not stay with me for one night and be my messenger?
As rising action continues, the prince slowly gives away his jewels, gold, his ruby to a poor seamstress, his sapphires to suffering children, and finally all his gold leaves to the poor. The climax occurs when winter arrives. The swallow is weak, freezing, and knows he may not survive, but he chooses to stay. When he dies at the prince's feet, the prince's little heart breaks in two. In the end, the statue is destroyed for being ugly, but God declares the swallow and the broken heart the most precious things in the city. According to Freytag's triangle, the story rises through sacrifices and ends with spiritual reward rather than material success.
The setting of The Happy Prince is a city that closely resembles of Victorian England, a place where beauty exists on the surface while suffering hides below. From the top of the statue, the prince can see the entire city, which allows the reader to understand the contrast between the wealthy and the poor. Now, let's talk about characters. The Happy Prince is compassionate and selfless. Ironically, he was only happy when he knew nothing about suffering. True awareness brings him sadness, but also purpose. The swallow begins the story as playful and slightly selfish, but he grows into a loyal and loving character who chooses kindness over survival. Meanwhile, the town official represents society's hypocrisies, but they admire beauty and ignore goodness. Together, this character reflects different moral choices in society.
One of the most powerful elements of this story is conflict. First, there is internal conflicts, which is the prince and the swallow versus poverty, suffering, and social injustice. Second, there is internal conflict, especially within the swallow, who must choose between following instincts or staying out of love and loyalty. Finally, the story presents a societal conflict, which is compassion versus materialism. The city values appearances, not humanity. The story is told using a third-person omniscient point of view, which allows readers to understand the emotions and thoughts of multiple characters. 1, 2, 3. This perspective helps us emotionally connect with the sacrifices being made and strengthens the moral message of the story.
At its core, The Happy Prince is a story about true happiness. Oscar Wilde suggests that happiness is not something we own, it's something we give. One major theme is sacrifice. Both the prince and the swallow gave up on everything they have, proving that love and kindness often comes with a cost. Wilde uses symbolism throughout the story. The statue represents false happiness based on appearances, while the lead heart symbolizes love that cannot be destroyed. irony is also present. The happy prince is called happy, yet he only finds peace after losing everything. In conclusion, the happy prince reminds us of real beauty lies in compassion and real happiness is found in selflessness. Even today, this story remains relevant in the world where inequality exists. Thank you for watching.
Hello everyone! In this video, I will be analyzing a selected short story titled The Happy Prince, written by Oscar Wilde. This short story is well known for its emotional storytelling and strong moral message. Although it is written in the style of a fairy tale, the story actually reflects real social issues that still exist in society today. For this analysis, I will be discussing several important aspects of the short story. These include the background of the story, the plot using Freytag triangle, the setting, characters and their characteristics, conflicts, point of view, themes, and literary devices. Through the analysis, I hope to show a clearer understanding of the story and explain why The Happy Prince is still relevant and meaningful to readers. The title of the story is The Happy Prince. It was written by Oscar Wilde and first published in the year 1888. Oscar Wilde was a famous Irish writer, poet, and playwright. He was known for his clever use of language, strong moral message, and criticism of society. Many of Oscar Wilde's works focus on social issues, especially the differences between the rich and the poor. He often used simple stories and beautiful language to highlight serious problems in society. The Happy Prince was written during the Victorian era. This was a period in history where there was a large gap between the wealthy upper class and the poor working class. During this time, many people lived in luxury and comfort, while others struggled with poverty, hunger, and poor living conditions. These social problems are clearly reflected in the story. At first glance, The Happy Prince appears to be children's fairy tale because it includes a statue and a talking bird. However, the story carries deep moral lessons and emotional themes that are more suitable for mature readers. Through the character of the Happy Prince, Oscar Wilde shows how wealth and beauty do not guarantee happiness. Only after the prince becomes a statue and is able to see suffering of others does he truly understand pain and compassion. Overall, The Happy Prince is not just a story about kindness, but also a criticism of a society that ignores the poor. Oscar Wilde uses this story to remind readers that true happiness comes from empathy, generosity, and helping others.
Now, I will explain the plot of The Happy Prince in detail using Freytag's triangle. Freytag's triangle consists of 5 parts: the exposition, the rising action, climax, falling action, and resolution. These structures help us to understand how the story develops and delivers its message. And now, let me begin with the exposition. The exposition introduces us to the main settings and the main characters, which is the Happy Prince. The Happy Prince is a statue standing high above the city. The statue is beautifully decorated with gold, sapphires for eyes, and a ruby on his sword. From the ground, the people admire the statue and praise it for being beautiful and also valuable. They believe that because the prince looks rich and perfect, so he must be truly happy. However, this is ironic because the prince himself is not happy at all. From his high position, the Happy Prince can see the reality of the city below him. He sees poor people struggling to survive, children suffering from hunger, and families living in misery. When the prince was alive, he lived a comfortable life and never experienced suffering. Now, as a statue, he finally able to see the pain of others, and this makes him deeply sad. This completes the exposition because it introduces the character, the settings, and the main problem of the story, which is social inequality. And now I will move on to the rising action. The rising action begins with the swallow arrives and stops to rest at the feet of the statue. The swallow is traveling to Egypt, where the weather is warm and pleasant. At this point, the swallow only focuses on his own comfort and survival. When the happy prince speaks to the swallow, the prince begins to describe the suffering that he sees in the city. He then asks the swallow to help him delivering the ruby from his sword to a poor seamstress. The seamstress is struggling to take care of her sick child, and she cannot afford medicine. Although the swallow is unsure at first, he agrees to help. This is the first act of kindness and marks the beginning of the rising action. The rising action continues as the prince asks the swallow to remove his sapphire eyes and give it to a poor writer who is unable to finish his works because of hunger and cold. Later, the prince asks the swallow to give his other sapphire eye to a match girl who has dropped her other matches and is afraid of being punished. Each time the swallow helps, he delays his journey to Egypt. As winter approaches, the weather becomes colder and the swallow becomes weaker. At the same time, the happy prince slowly loses his beauty as he gives away his jewels and gold to help the poor. During this rising action, we can clearly see the character development of the swallow. He changes from being selfish to becoming a compassionate and selfless. The tension increases because we know the swallow is putting his life at risk by staying behind. Now, I will explain the climax of the story. The climax occurs when winter finally arrives, and the swallow becomes too weak to fly. Despite knowing that staying will lead to his death, the swallow chooses to remain with the happy prince. This is the most emotionally and intense moment in the story. The swallow sacrifices his life out of loyalty and love for the prince. When the swallow dies at the feet of the statue, the happy prince's lead heart breaks into two. Now, this moment symbolizes the ultimate sacrifice and the depth of compassion shown by both characters. The climax represents the turning point of the story, where sacrifice reaches its highest level. Now, let's move into the following action. In the following action, the city officials and the townspeople notice that the statue has lost its beauty. The gold has been stripped away and the jewels are gone. Because the statue no longer looks valuable, the people decide that it is no longer useful. The statue is taken down and melted. However, the broken lead heart was not melted and is thrown away together with the dead swallow. This shows how society judges worth based only on appearance and material value. Finally, I will explain the resolution. In the resolution, God asks an angel the two most precious things in the city. The angel chooses the broken lead heart of the happy prince and the dead swallow. God rewards them by allowing the swallow to sing forever in paradise and placing the happy prince in the city of gold. This ending shows that true value is not found in wealth or beauty, but in kindness, sacrifice, and love. Through Freytag's triangle, Oscar Wilde clearly delivers the moral message of the story and remind readers that true happiness comes from helping others.
Settings. The main setting of the story is a city that resembles Victorian England. The city represents a society divided by wealth. The story takes place mainly on the statue of the Happy Prince, which stands high above the city. This high position allows the prince to see the suffering of the poor. Another setting is the streets and homes of the poor people, which highlight poverty and hardships. The contrast between the luxurious statue and the poor surrounding emphasizes social inequality. Characters and characteristics. The main character is the Happy Prince. He is compassionate, selfless, and empathetic. Even though he is a statue, he shows more humanity than many people in the city. The Swallow is another main character. At first, he is selfish and concerned only about his own comfort. However, he becomes loyal, kind, and selfless as the story progresses. Minor characters include the poor citizen, such as the seamstress and the playwright, who represent the suffering lower class. Conflict. The story contains both internal and external conflicts. The internal conflict occurs within the Swallow, as he struggles between saving himself and helping the prince. Internal conflict is the social inequality and poverty faced by the people in the city. These conflicts highlight the moral struggles between selfishness and compassion.
Point of view. This story is written using a third-person omniscient point of view. This allows the reader to understand the emotions and the thoughts of both the Happy Prince and the Swallow. Because of this point of view, readers are able to connect emotionally with the characters and understand their sacrifices. Next is theme. One of the most major themes of the story is true happiness. The author, Oscar Wilde, suggests that true happiness comes from helping others, not from beauty or wealth. Another theme is sacrifice. It is shown through both the Happy Prince and the Swallow giving up everything they have for others. Lastly, the theme of social inequality is also central, as the story criticizes how society treats and ignores the poor.
Oscar Wilde uses several literary devices in this story. Symbolism is shown through statue, which symbolizes superficial beauty and wealth, while irony is present because the prince is unhappy, while the people who admire him lack compassion. Personification is used when the statue and the swallow express emotions and thoughts. These devices help strengthen the moral message of the story. In conclusion, The Happy Prince is a meaningful short story that teaches us about kindness, sacrifice, and humanity. Though its characters, plots, and themes, Oscar Wilde reminds us that true happiness comes from helping others. Despite being written many years ago, the story remains relevant in today's society.